No, we were talking about her girlfriend. Yeah. She was in the hospital when he was
Good morning.
It's a
Good morning.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so
Yes, right.
we're settling in. Getting ready to start.
I am.
Take another 30 seconds.
Okay.
Okay. So this week we are absolutely nowhere as far as the calendar is concerned. It's one of those parts of the Jewish calendar where we're really not in. We're not counting the Omer. It's not 3 weeks. It's not 7 weeks. It's not. Still Sivan, right? I saw in one of those pamphlets that they give out from Rabbi Victor Miller. There was a Shavuos version, so we had various questions and answers. I think the last one was, what should we think about during the summer or something like that? He said the summer is the best time of the year. To walk outside and see the sunlight, and Hashem is showering you with the nutrients and vitamins that we get from the sunlight, and it's a time to be happy. And, sometimes we get very caught up in our religion, and we think there must be something wrong because it's just the summertime and I'm just enjoying the nice weather. That can't be religious. And he's saying, I heard somewhere, I think it was in the name of the altar of Slovakia, that actually the line was something like experiencing Hashem's blessing is the highest or best form of connection to Hashem, or the one that Hashem prefers the most. Like we say that there are reasons sometimes that we need challenges and unpleasant things, but really, sort of the natural state, Hashem wants to shower us with His goodness, and when we get that, we should appreciate it. And it's part of gratitude. That's why when the Jews traveled, in a couple of weeks, not too many weeks, we'll read about how they began to approach the place where they would cross the river into the promised land, and they had to bypass the various nations of Ammon and Moab and Edom. And none of them would let the Jews through. Moshe recounts this in Nevarim when he reviews the travels of Ibn Israel, and he says, tells them that Hashem said to me, turn northward, meaning after the 38 years in the desert, they had to just stay there. Now turn northward, start going along the eastern border, but you'll cross the river eventually to the west. You're going to pass by your brethren, the children of Esav. Don't fight with them, and their land is not for you. But you can purchase food from them and water from them for drinking, because Hashem has blessed you in all of your handiwork, and He took care of you during the entire time that you traveled in the desert for these 40 years. You never lacked anything. So what is He saying? Rashi explains, Hashem has blessed you, so don't be ungrateful and present yourself as if you're poor. Demonstrate your wealth. Seems to be, Rashi doesn't elaborate, he seems to be connected to the statement that you're going to pass by the children of Esav, you're not going to fight with them, you're not going to take anything from them, but you could and you should purchase food from them. And what's the alternative? I'm not exactly sure, but it sounds like you might, not want to spend the money, you might feel you don't need to spend the money, but I say, no, you have the money, Hashem gave it to you, don't be ungrateful. Don't act like you're poor because you're not. So again, I think I'm sure there's commentary on the Rashi, but at a very basic level, Rashi is telling us that when Hashem blesses us, sometimes, apparently, human nature, for whatever reason, we almost deny Hashem's blessings. And, obviously, we're definitely used to hearing the other side of the coin. Don't spend money that you don't have. Live within your means, etc. But on the other hand, the point isn't, well, you should spend money, you should live an extravagant life, but he's saying gratitude means acknowledging and showing Hashem's gift. If Hashem has made you rich, don't act like you're poor. That's being ungrateful. And it's important for us to remember. Sometimes, again, religion we sometimes think is all about self-denial and all about helping us deal with the challenging parts of life, which it does help us with those things. But basically, Hashem is all about chesed, all about giving to us. And the true perspective in the Torah is everything is a gift. Even the unpleasant things are gifts, and the pleasant things are certainly gifts. So, kind of an indication of where we stand is when we actually do have the gifts, and we should embrace them and thank Hashem for those gifts. So, in this week's parsha, Beha'alosech, the flow of the Torah is kind of it varies greatly, as we know. Like the first book of the Torah is a story that covers vast amounts of time in a short period of time, and then slows down and talks about a few individuals at great length. And then we get into the second book of the Torah, we talk about our national history, our origins, and the key events in the formation of the Jewish people, good ones and bad ones. Vayikra, the third book of the Torah, is almost entirely laws, a lot of which don't really apply to us today, like the laws of sacrificial service and tzaras. Some of them do apply. And now in the book of Bamidbar, we focused largely on the travels of the Jews in the desert. And we spent the last 2 weeks talking about numbers and counting and formations, and all of a sudden this week we start to move. So, as we know, the actual period that the Jews spent in the desert was 40 years. That in next week's parsha we find out why it was 40 years. In this week's parsha we talk about the initial beginning of their journey, which should have taken a very short time. And it describes how the system that was set in place with the 4 camps and the formation of the tribe of Levi in the center, and the sanctuary of the Mishkan in the center of that was all activated. And as they traveled in formation, and they began their journey from the desert into the promised land. And as we know, the Torah makes much of the fact that the traveling was all at the command of Hashem. They had a system. They were alerted by a cloud. There were trumpets that Moshe would use to signal the people, and there was a precise order of which tribes would travel first, and what order how the tribes would be grouped. The Gemara makes an interesting statement. It says, it talks about the laws of Shabbos. We may have discussed this the other day. Doesn't matter. We can always repeat it. Every activity that's forbidden on Shabbos, all the 39 principal types of malacha, are constructive in some way. That's the definition of malacha. It doesn't really mean work. Avoda means work. Malacha means a craft or task or something of that sort. All the 39 activities are they are constructive. They are only prohibited according to Torah law if they are constructive. It's the definition of a malacha. By definition, if it's something which is destructive, is not forbidden, which is why one of the reasons when we tear open packaging on Shabbos for Yom Tov, so we're opening up a bag of potato chips, one of the recommendations, in some cases requirements, is to do it in a destructive manner. Also Danny Weiss described how he had gone for a Shabbos and early on, and he had gone. I think he had a partner in Torah. And he went for Shabbos, and they were opening up the chovos or whatever it was, and he noticed how aggressively they opened up each package. But then they explained there was actually a halachic reason for that. It's not that we attack our food, but the reason is that basically it certainly takes any activity which could be biblically a malacha is certainly not a malacha if it's done in an instructive manner, because that's the definition.
What manner?
Destructive.
Destructive.
When I open the page, I have to stop and
So what destructive? So the question is, what destructive? So there's actually I should say, I may have maybe oversimplified. There's really two. There's a number of principles that come into play when we're dealing with Shabbos. Shabbos, there are 39 categories of work. Some of them are very general, but the common denominator is that they all have to be constructive. That itself tells you something important about the laws of Shabbos, which is unlike certain other kinds of commandments, there is an abstract component to the commandment. So, for example, the contrast would be eating ham. Right? Eating ham is not allowed according to Torah law. Now, it doesn't matter, like they say, Dr. Seuss. If you eat it on a boat or on a go, if you're eating ham, you're eating ham. Now, obviously, there may be exceptions, like if a person's life is in danger, but basically the activity doesn't get defined by your intention or by the circumstances. The intention is only relevant in terms of how much is a person to blame. They do it on purpose, they do it by accident, or maybe they would even right if their life was in danger. Right? And many other laws, many if not most of the laws in the Torah are like that. In terms of positive mitzvot, it's not always as simple. So, for example, if a person does a commandment without any intention, they pick up a cracker and says, "Oh, that was actually matzah, and it's actually Pesach." They do a mitzvah. So there are those that say that a mitzvah doesn't count if it's not done with intention. That's a debate. So that's in terms of positive action. But again, even if the mitzvah requires intention, it's matzah either way, but maybe as a mitzvah, it doesn't count as a mitzvah unless I do it with intention. But what's unique about the laws of Shabbos is that, let's say a person, if I were to let's think of an example. If I were to reach into a bowl, close my eyes, reach into a bowl and pull something out, is that a forbidden activity? No. If I were to look at a bowl and say, "Oh, that bowl is full of peanuts, but there's one raisin in the bowl. I hate raisins. Let me take it out," that's a full-fledged biblical violation of Shabbos. Just as if I would have taken wood, started a fire, and cooked a steak. It's the same thing, right? So it's entirely based on my intention. If I said, "Wow, there's one raisin in the bowl. I love raisins. Let me take it out," that would be totally fine. So the intention is not just important because it determines, how guilty or not guilty I am, but it actually defines what the activity is. The whole idea that something has to be constructive rather than destructive, almost by definition, means there has to be intention, right? What defines something as constructive or destructive? Only my intention. So, for example, one of the 39 malachas is lighting a fire. Another one of the 39 malachas is putting out a fire. Right? Yep. How does one violate the malacha of putting out a fire? So they say if you have Shabbos candles, you have to be careful to close the door gently. You don't want to close the door if you can blow out the candles. These are important things. But let's say a person would walk over to a candle and says, "Oh, what's this with all of you people are such sticklers on all these laws. You tell me I can't close the door because if I blow out the candle, watch this," and I blow out the candle. I have not violated a biblical commandment. A rabbinical commandment, yes. Biblical commandment, no. Why? Because I didn't accomplish anything constructive. I didn't accomplish anything at all. As a matter of fact, and this is a Mishnah, let's say I say, "Wow, it's already 11 o'clock at night. Everyone's going to sleep. why waste a perfectly good candle? We can use it for next week. And I blow out the candle. Also not a biblical violation according to Machlokas in the Mishnah. Why? Because what's constructive about that? The only thing I did was I prevented an unwanted consumption of a candle that wasn't serving a purpose. I simply removed something that was, again, rabbinically it's certainly forbidden. But that's why if I would want to save the candle for next week, and I said to my non-Jewish neighbor, what a shame. I can't blow out the candle, and I guess it's just going to burn down, and I won't have it for next week. I'll need a new one for next week. And the neighbor says, no problem, I'll blow it out for you. That's perfectly fine. I can even do that on purpose. I can knock on my neighbor's door and say, why are you knocking on my door? You say, well, I just wanted to tell you what a shame it is that my candle is burning down. The neighbor says, do you want me to come and blow it out for you? And I say, well, I can't ask you to do things like that for me on Shabbos. He says, no problem. He comes up and blows it out. That's fine. That's totally fine. Because am I benefiting from anything that my non-Jewish neighbor did? No. I might be happy that...
You're planning for the future.
Yeah, I'm planning for... But I didn't do anything. I didn't even say anything. I simply observed, commented on the fact that...
Is that where intent comes in?
So...
Isn't there intent to be constructive to save the candle?
Right. So the point of this, and maybe this is...
talking about the action.
Right, the point is that to define... The key point is this. The definition of a malacha, of what we call work on Shabbos, is that I perform an act which has a positive and constructive benefit. So let's say carrying, right, when there's no Arab. I need to bring the object A from point A to point B, and I bring it to point. So now I have it. So I'm going to be in shul, and I need a sitter, but the sitter's in my house. So I bring the sitter from my house to the shul, and I bring it across the street. There's no Arab. So I have accomplished something. I now have a sitter that I can use. Or I say, oh, I don't remember how to daven by heart. At least if I daven by heart, I'll be so focused on trying to remember the davening, I won't be able to concentrate. Let me write out the davening from memory, and then I'll have a sitter, and then I'll read from the sitter, right? So I've accomplished something. I've written something down. Let's say I say, oops, this is no good. I wrote this davening down, and I don't like what I did. It's messy, it's sloppy. I think I'm going to just erase it. Did I accomplish anything by erasing it? So here's the thing. Erasing is one of the 39 forms of work. So is blowing out a candle. Right? Why are these things constructive? So the answer is, it always has to be a constructive purpose. So in the olden days, maybe we would do it today too if we weren't so wasteful. In the olden days, you took a piece of parchment and you took an animal skin. You skinned the animal. You scraped off the hair. You sliced the skin, whatever, you did whatever you did. And then you smoothed out the surface and prepared it for writing. You wrote on it. And if you didn't like what you wrote, or if you needed to reuse it, you would scrape off. Right? Here's a wooden floor, right? You live in a house for 20 years, and then you want to move and sell the house. So they come. What do? They scrape off the top layer of the floor. Wooden floor. Erasing is really preparing a surface to write again. Instructions. People do, they buy a house, and the house has been lived in, so immediately they knock everything down, or knock it all down to rebuild it. So it's a constructive act. All these things are constructive. If someone says, if a rioter, smashes a window, that's not constructive. That's demolition with no constructive purpose. It's not a malacha. Again, now these things are all forbidden rabbinically. You can't erase writing even if it's not constructive. You can't. But when it comes to food packaging, so there's really 2 points. One is the fact that there are actually a number of forms of work that can be issues when opening up a food package. Potentially, I think what's usually the biggest issue is the creation of a usable implement. So if you take a box, for example, especially something like a box of cereal, where you typically don't finish it in one sitting. So it's designed with a flap. You can open the flap, and then the box now serves as a container to store whatever was left of the cereal for the next week or 2 or 3 till you finished it. So it's the creation of that item that's a constructive act. Now, so I guess I kind of misspoke. I said if you tear it open, it's done destructively, you haven't violated. The truth is, if you tear it open, you accomplish something even more significant, because it isn't just that you created something destructively, you didn't actually create anything. You tear it open so that you aren't actually creating anything useful. So the idea of opening the box at both ends, you open up the bottom flaps first. And opening up the bottom flaps, certainly that's not the way anyone opens the box if they're planning to reuse it. So first you open up the bottom, and then you open up the top, which is the way you would normally open it. But by that time, the bottom has already been opened, so you're left with nothing. So in a can of tuna, let's see, some people, again, these things are debatable. They're debated largely because they're disposable, they're not necessarily reused, but there's definitely a concern, according to some, that it could be reused. And once upon a time, or maybe even today in some parts of the world, I once saw a book about showcasing different countries and lifestyles of people. I think it was in Albania. A lady was literally using metal cans to cook because they were so poor, so they didn't have pots. So, you can.
Does the intention come into play there?
It could. It could.
Does intention come into play?
Right. So they say the potato chip bag, for example. Like some people say, because they're flimsy and not really reused and not really that good for reusing, there are those that say it's not even necessary to just open it normally because no one considers that to be. Again, this is where intention comes in the sense that nobody would consider a potato chip bag a receptacle of any sort. You can call anything a receptacle.
Thinking about
tuna cans, right? So tuna cans, I think, are an area where some people debate. I'm not exactly sure why.
Somebody just asked me this question last week
Yeah.
on Shabbos in Chabad, whether they could open a can of tuna
So there's
on
different
Shabbos.
opinions on it.
And we talked about creating a container.
Yeah, well, that's the issue.
Right.
That's largely the issue. Yeah.
But could you take it all and poke a hole in the bottom of it?
Yeah, well, that's the idea, right? You make a hole. You do something that guarantees you're not left with anything that would be useful.
Okay.
And again, you can say, well, even if you poke a hole in the bottom, but you can still use it. Again, intention comes in the sense that, look, if you lived in if there was some need, some purpose, let's say, broken tuna cans were very useful for. And the point is, why is it not? How come when you open both ends of the box, it's no longer a container? Because nobody would use it anymore. There's nothing you can do with it. If people use them as doormats,
You have to, like then you have the bag inside the cereal box, you have to do the same thing.
So that's again, there are those that, like a potato chip bag, there would be, ideally, if I wanted to do the best practice, take a Ziploc, tear significantly the inner bag, and then transfer the contents into a Ziploc. So that would avoid any issues. I think, again, the argument would be potentially that the inner bag, unlike the box, is not that substantial, and so even if you did tear it, I think that there is definitely a recommendation that if you could, the first recommendation is to open it all before Shabbos.
Right.
Like our solution, so about like say Yom Tov, there are a lot of these things that you could do for cooking as long as
Right.
So then to me it makes it.
So on Yom Tov, the issue is that, as like we discussed the other day, not every type of work is permitted for purposes. It's sort of specific with construction is one of the malachas that's not permitted for Yom Tov. Let's say, for example, you're camping on Yom Tov. You want to have a picnic. Now you can barbecue steak on Yom Tov if you're making a picnic. Nothing wrong with that. I know somebody who did that on Shavuos. They had propane grill on Shavuos morning. They grilled food. Charcoal. Okay.
You can't shut
Because
it off.
they can bring an existing.
You can't set it up, right. But you cannot set up a tent, even though it's for camping, because construction is not one of the activities that's closely related, whatever the reason, the different reason. Not one of the activities is on the short list of food preparation items. Shechting a cow is fine. But, so there is a list. You can chef the cow, but you can't pitch a tent. Yeah.
And the other go back to the candle. I don't know if that was finished.
Okay, so I'm sorry. I maybe I should sort of to disjoint it. That's a kind of a separate discussion. Sorry. The key is that every form of work on Shabbos has an identity in terms of what kind of act it is and what kind of purpose it accomplishes. And in the halakhic literature, there's a number of factors to consider when you analyze whether something is a forbidden act. Now, just to point out, in most cases, even if it's not forbidden biblically, it's forbidden rabbinically, but these factors will serve as combinations. Things that we allow are often because of a combination of factors. There's a few boxes you have to check. One is the act intentional to begin with? Right? So I'm dragging a bench across my backyard because I want to sit under the tree. As I drag the bench, it digs a hole in the ground. I don't even mean to dig the hole. So that's not even intentional to begin with. Second question is, let's say it's intentional. Let's assume that the act is going to happen. Maybe I even intend, but why do I intend for this act? Digging a hole in the Torah's prototype was related to the act of plowing. You were preparing the ground. You wanted to plant seed. Is that why I want to dig a hole, or is there some other purpose? Maybe I'm digging a hole because I want some soil, because I want to put soil in scattering on the ground to soak up the still. What is the real purpose of this hole? Does it match the type of purpose that was mentioned in the Torah? Assuming that there was a purpose behind it. Okay. Let's. So it's the rule of thumb, general. Rule of general is don't do anything if it's going to result in a Sabbath violation. But
The intention is to save the candle, so how is that not?
so getting back to it, so what is the, again, with the caveat, this is largely a theoretical discussion. In the Torah's prototype, how can blowing out a candle ever be a constructive act? And the answer is, one of the clues that we can use is that all of these acts were associated in some way with the construction of the Mishkan. So what constructive purpose would you have blowing out a fire? There's only one purpose. That is to create charcoal. So the only way you can create charcoal is by lighting a fire, then extinguishing it, and using what's left. Charcoal has uses. It has some very important uses. So according to, I believe this is the accepted opinion, the only way one would biblically violate the prohibition of extinguishing a fire is if one was trying to create charcoal and used the melting wax. Well, the question is, does that require you to extinguish the fire? And with charcoal, so again, the reason this is relevant to terms of asking a non-Jew is that there are two prohibitions primarily that relate to a non-Jew doing work for me on Shabbos. In most cases, putting aside, let's say, business arrangements and stuff, I can't ask the person to do work on Shabbos, even if no matter when I do it, I can't specifically, can you please do this for me on Shabbos? Can you please perform X type of work? So I have to be careful with what I say. But, that you can always find a way to essentially describe a situation without asking for anything, without commanding or requesting anything. So assuming you address that and you simply make the aware of the issue, not actually ask them to do anything. The other thing you need to be careful about is that you can't derive benefit from work done for you on Shabbos. Right? And those are the two key three key factors are deriving benefit from what's done for you on Shabbos. So if you forgot to light the candles and someone turns on the light or lights the candles for you, you're deriving benefit from what's done for you on Shabbos. If you lit the candle, but now you don't want it to burn anymore, and the person blows the candle out, you're not deriving any benefit. You're simply happy that the candle is out. You might derive benefit from it next Shabbos when you have a candle, but that's okay. That's why if turning on a light is a problem, turning off is a problem, because if a person turns on the light, I'm benefiting from the light. If a person turns off the light, I'm not benefiting from the dark. I'm just happy there's no more light.
So it was okay with that my neighbor came and set my refrigerator to turn it off the light when I forgot to do it.
So that's a perfect example of how you could effectively benefit from the help of a non-Jew. You could say, oh my goodness, I can't open the fridge because there's a light on. If I open the fridge, the light will turn on. So the non-Jew opens the fridge and unscrews the light bulb. They didn't make the fridge. They didn't make your food cold. They didn't do anything. All they did was they simply removed something that was preventing you from doing what you needed to do. You're not deriving.
But he's turning it off. Turning it on is different.
It's subtle. It's subtle.
What?
How is it okay for the neighbor to turn the gas
On is not okay. But with lights, lights or anything else is okay if it's enhancing something that you. If it's daytime and you can see, and the light helps you see better, that's okay as long as you're doing things that you could have done anyways. Like if it was too dark to read, now you can read. You can't read, but you can eat because you. Right, and you wouldn't be able to use it at night. I remember Rosh Hashanah, we had this issue because we were during COVID, we were dining in a tent, and there was a light on, and the issue was that during the daytime, even if we had the light, we didn't really need the light, but at night, at a certain point, we wouldn't be able to daven without the light. I don't remember what we did in the end about that situation, but that would be the issue. You wouldn't be able to do something that you couldn't do before. So that's the issue. But when in fact you can get to your food, getting to your food is not work. The being able to open the fridge door, you're prevented because of a halachic issue. It's a peripheral thing. Matter of fact, even if someone opens a package, let's say certain kinds of bottles are problematic to open on Shabbos. So if someone opens it for you, you're drinking the contents that are in the bottle, but they didn't make the soda. They just took off the cover. The truth is that, anyway, there are permissible ways to do it. Like if you theoretically, you could just make a hole in the bottle. But aside from that, you're not benefiting from the work. The work is simply removing a barrier that prevents